Welcome back to my channel. I'm AK Mulford, a full-time author. I'm part-time Chaos Gremlin, sharing with you behind-the-scenes author life and helpful but unhinged writing advice. And today I'm sharing with you 4 lessons that I've learned in 4 years of being a full-time author. They're insights that I've shared often with fellow author friends, but honestly there should be like a secret 5th piece of advice that is be wary about advice, especially if it's trying to be like prescriptive and saying you have to do this or you need to do that in order to be a successful author, because for every piece of advice like that, there's a dozen successful authors doing the exact opposite. So whatever advice you see around there, think like, does this actually help me? Is this how I want to do it? Can I amalgamate this advice into my process and my style? And if you can't, leave it. But here are 4 things that I find myself coming back to time and time again. Some I learned right out the gate. Some took me some time and some years to get to. But first, a real quick rapid fire overview of my publishing career so far. I am a hybrid author, meaning I both self-publish and traditionally publish. I started off self-publishing intentionally. I never pursued traditional publishing with my first book. I knew I wanted to learn the industry and like learn the ropes and be able to know like for myself that I could make some amount of money on my own before pursuing a publisher, and knowing a bit more about how to market myself and the business side of things and the ins and outs, and also having a better sense of how to advocate for myself in the industry as well. There's a certain like safety net of knowing like I can make X number of dollars on a book by myself. And it also means that, you know, I wouldn't take less than that amount on in advance unless it was for strategic purposes. It gives me a lot more flexibility. Also, long before I published my first book, I was thinking about publishing. Like I'd been thinking about writing books since I was a small kid. I'd been writing stories, like full-length books, since I was like a teenager, just for myself in a graveyard of all sorts of different projects, learning how to tell stories and how to craft books from a very young age. And then I started just getting interested in the industry as a kind of like hyper focus of like what I would do at the advent of self-publishing. I started developing imaginary 5-year plans of like how I would go about doing that, and thinking, you know, how many books would I need to release to make the same as I was making at my minimum wage conservation job. And one of the things that I learned in that over a decade of just being interested in the industry but not actively pursuing it was that hybrid authors on the whole tended to make the most money and last the longest in the industry. And so for me, with my goal being to be able to financially support myself with my writing, and also hopefully I'll still be publishing books in 20 years, 30 years from now, I want to have a sustainable career as well. So being a hybrid author seemed like the right way to go. And another piece of advice that I saw was that if you're a successful indie author, doors will open for you. People will come find you. You don't need to go find them. For me, that was definitely the case. So when I published my first book, The High Mountain Court, I was expecting it to be kind of crickets and I'd be shouting into the void, and hopefully by my 10th book or so, maybe start to earn back the amount of money I spent creating them. Like that was my goal, was 5 years in to make like hopefully maybe 30K a year and grind until I could get to some level of success. Well, it was one of those shiny unicorn books and it was right place, right time, and people seemed to really love it. And so it took off and was very successful right away. And so then all of a sudden I had to kind of throw out my 5-year plans and develop new 5-year plans really quickly, because I'd already gotten to the end of that 5-year plan. When my second book came out, I was starting to be pursued by different agents for representation, and I realized that I was already out of my depth with how much attention I was getting and how much was going on for me at the time. I feel like I'm in a much more like sane, stable place now, but it was a lot for first few books. And so I had agents pursuing me, and I kind of was able to interview them and pick someone that I wanted to go with. And I found my now agent Jess, who is amazing, and we've had a really great few years together. And so from there, Jess asked me if I wanted to sell my first series, and I said no. How about I write you a new series, one that I'd been thinking of? And so I wrote A River of Golden Bones and gave that to her to shop around. And through the sale of that trilogy, my now publisher Harper Voyager said we would also like a High Mountain Court series. And I was like, I don't know, but you know, never say never. How much would you offer me for it? And they offered me more than I wanted. And so it ended up going from a 3-book deal to an 8-book deal. And all of a sudden I was a hybrid author. And so I kept the rights to all of my novellas, so was still self-publishing those, and was pursuing my rom-com indie pen name as well. All of that happened within the first year of publishing. Cut to 4 years and 29 books later, published. This week, my 29th book, Curses and Cold Brew, is being published. Crazy. And I've signed on for a new 3-book deal with Harper Voyager as well. Dreamslayer is the first book. It's coming out next year. So that will be our ninth, 10th, 11 books together, which is fantastic. And I'm really proud of this new series. So I'm excited about that as well. I've got many, many books out in the world. I make more money than I ever expected to in this career. And I'm very grateful that I have an amazing, loyal readership who goes out and champions my books and reads all my stories and tells other people about them and seems to love the worlds that I create, because it's my favorite thing to do is create stories for people. It's been a wild journey. There's been a lot of highs and lows. There's been some surprising curveballs. There's been some things that I've realized and insights that I've gotten that I never thought from the outside when I started off publishing. And so here are some of the lessons that I've learned, and maybe you will find them helpful and resonate with you as well on your authoring journey, and some things that I wish I could go back and kind of tell myself and give myself some of this advice when I was starting out. First piece of advice: a lot of things are going to feel like an emergency, but they aren't. This is something that I feel like I need to remind myself and my friends every other week. The publishing industry feels like everything's on fire all the time. I'm constantly having to remind people that we're not firefighters, we're just storytellers, it's gonna be okay, but everything feels like an emergency and it feels like it needs you and your attention right now, constantly. Not everything needs my attention right now, and I don't need to capture every reader right now either. I think especially nowadays when authors are expected to market their own books, whether it's trad or indie, there's this feeling that every day that you're not on social media is a day that you've lost sales or you've lost your readers. That's a really dangerous and toxic way of kind of like navigating this industry. I have so many friends who are like, I have to post today while they're like in the emergency room. And I've seen so many people who've gone really, really hard on social media without setting any boundaries or like creating any sort of mental health self-care strategies. And it completely fries them out because they feel like right now I have to be everything all the time, instead of thinking of like promoting in cycles or batching content and then cruising for a while and realizing that like your readers will still be there. Also, every day that you're not on social media is a missed opportunity. Only works if you think of your energy as infinite, right? Like if you only have 100 energy bucks to spend and 5 of those dollars is going towards marketing, then that might be 1 or 2 posts for the week. I always tell people social media is kind of like the single-use plastic of marketing. Like it has a very short shelf life and then it's gone forever. Unless you can keep reusing that content or repurposing it in different ways in different places, giving it to other people to share, or using it like a template that you keep changing up the tropes and different graphics within it very quickly and not putting a lot of time and energy into it, it's going to fry you out to create all of this content unless you have heaps of time and space for it. For me, I homeschool 2 kids. I don't have an infinite well of marketing resources and energy. I could pay someone else to do more of it, but I choose not to. I like to do my own marketing. And so I just do less of it and I take breaks when I need to. And I think that this kind of like everything's an emergency, the house is on fire kind of mentality can only sustain you for a very short amount of time before you either burn out or you realize you need to set up something more sustainable. Lesson 2, be more in love with the act of writing than your book's reception out in the world. This is something that I feel like I hold very sacred. Like the act of creating books is very different to me than publishing them. I've always written stories and I will always create stories, and I don't think I'll ever retire from being a storyteller. Whether or not I retire from publishing and putting my books out into the world for other people to consume is another beast entirely. To separate the storytelling from the industry. The industry has highs and lows, it has trends, it has things that change, but if you keep getting really excited about the next book and the next story you're going to tell, you're going to be okay, because you're always going to have the next thing. Sometimes you're going to have books that just like hit right and are really easy to market and people are really excited about them, and you're going to have some books that you don't know why, but you're just hustling and they're just not going anywhere. I've had friends who are hugely, hugely successful authors, really big names, and they've had these highs and lows. If you're around long enough, it's not a one-way trajectory. I think that a lot of people, the first dip they hit, they give up and they throw in the towel and they call it a day. And that's because they've attached their identity to being like a capital A author, and they care more about how they're perceived by their peers and writing as like a status thing than they care about actually telling stories. I think the storytellers are the ones who stick around. Whatever you have to do to hold sacred the act of storytelling, it's hugely powerful to longevity in this industry. It means that it will always be something that's special to you and precious to you. And then as soon as it goes to my editor rather than it's a product that I'm selling. I find that quite heartening in an ever-changing industry that I know I'll always be creating. Lesson number 3, learn what is your enough. This is something I was conscious of it and I still missed it because I had goals that I hit very quickly. While I felt incredibly grateful and really excited about hitting those goals, I also had a moment of like, okay, well, what now? And I think that while it's a good thing to always be striving for the next thing, for me, the goals are always the next story and not the next pillar of success. I've learned very early on, and I'm very grateful to all of these successful authors who have been friends of mine from very early in my career, who have made me realize that like, if you keep moving the goalpost every time you hit a goal, you're never going to be happy. Like you're always going to feel unfulfilled. And most of the authors I talk to are discontent with where they're at, even the very, very successful ones. Find that like kind of fascinating, but also a little bit sad. People who are like, well, I didn't sell 100,000 copies, and so now I'm going to be crying and upset. And it's so real. Like I don't fault them for that because it's such a real thing that's happening in their brain of like, I've decided that now this is my normal. This is my self-worth is at this number. And if I dip below that, then it's all falling apart and I'm a failure now. Competitive brains are just designed to think that we have to constantly be one-upping ourselves. And if we're not doing better than our last thing, that we're failures and we're bad. And that was really scary for me because I remembered thinking like, when is it going to be enough? When am I going to be allowed to be happy? Looking at all my friends and seeing them all still unhappy with all of their great successes, I was like, oh no, never. Like the answer is never. And I don't want that to be me. And so then I very quickly like recalibrated and was like, okay, what is my enough? What is, if I'm hitting these targets, I'm good. If I dip closer but still above what my good enough line is, I can't be mad about it. For me, I have this philosophy and I even have a tattoo and it's called B3. It's based on primatology actually. It's based on how the third ranked chimps are the happiest and live the longest and have the least amount of stress hormones. Turns out this is a human phenomenon too. I came from it from my nerdy primatology background, but actually it's called the bronze medal effect. What they find is that bronze medalists tend to be the happiest. The silver is the least happy because they were so close to number 1 and so close to like the top goal. And the gold medalist is kind of like very happy, but also like, well, how am I going to do this again? Now anything less than gold is a failure. And the bronze medalist is just like, I'm happy I'm on the podium. Like I'm happy to be on the platform. I'm aiming for bronze and everything where I'm just kind of like ticking right along beneath all of the big names and all of the people who are struggling to do all this top level work, but still making good money and enjoying telling the stories that I want to tell and having the opportunity to reach a lot of readers and all of those things. I want to be the happiest in my career, and they seem to, across species, be the happiest ones. In this industry, there's a lot of strings to be pulled. There's always other things you could be doing. You can always be doing more than what you're doing right now. For me, the key is looking at all the strings and deciding not to pull them and knowing when things hit a certain number, it's time to pull some strings again. For me, my goal is to do just enough to stay at my goals and not overwork myself and burn myself out doing more than what my enough is. It was really interesting to me when I started having success to see people around me being like, okay, well, now what's next? You need to do even more. You need to go even harder. You need to hustle even more. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I thought that the goal was to be able to like do less. Like I thought the success and the money afforded us like more time to spend with our families and more time to like take a day off or go on holiday or something. Like I didn't realize that the goal was to work even harder and do even more until it killed me, you know? And that was kind of like the path that I saw a lot of people getting on. And I'm like, that's not my goal. My goal is to be able to support my family with my writing, tell the stories that I want to tell, and do the kinds of marketing and engaging that I enjoy doing and taking breaks. It baffled me how many people were not in alignment with that as a goal and kind of were looking at me like I was crazy for not wanting more and more and more. I saw the Cassandras. I feel like now that's me. I'm warning people like, hey, have a sense of what is enough for you. What parameters do I need to feel okay and happy and content with what I'm doing as an author? Having a really clear sense of what is good enough. And then anything that you want to do beyond that when you have the spoons and energy for it is great, but it's all cake. Like it's all extra. But having a really clear defined sense of that line, I think is hugely important in an industry that's always going to make you feel like you need to be doing more. And my last lesson learned that I feel like is something I wish I could go back and tell myself earlier on in my career is take time to rest and reflect. This should probably be obvious and should go without saying, but I feel like a lot of authors never take a break. They're constantly grinding, they're constantly tapped in, and then they disappear. And it's like, no wonder why, because we just never give ourselves a break. I think this is something that happens with all sorts of people who are self-employed or starting their own businesses and things like that. It's like we never really take time off. But resting is so important to like continuing to be around 10 years from now. You know, if I never rested, I would never get to my 100th book, you know? But also the reflecting part is huge on that as well, because I feel like we're so goal-oriented, we're so next book focused that we never take time to like lift our head up and look how far we've come. Just yesterday, I laid out all of the books that I've published, and I was like, holy shit, like, whoa, look at all these books. So in the minutia of the moments that you forget to stop and lift your head up and reflect on how far you've come, it's also why I keep a gratitude journal, one for like my life, but also one specifically for authoring, because you will have all these great moments happen to you in your authoring career. You'll have someone leave a comment about how much they loved your book, or send you an email about like how you inspired them to start writing or something like that. Little wins and things, and you will forget them because you're either getting so hung up on the one negative thing, or you're just so focused on your admin list and what needs to come next. You appreciate them in the moment, but then they're gone the second you look away. And so for me, writing them all down kind of like cements them into permanent memory. They all amount to so much, and I'm able to like really reflect and appreciate them and not take them for granted. So taking that time to really rest and reflect and look at all of your achievements, really celebrate the small wins and the small victories, I feel like is huge to continuing on and continuing forward. So yeah, I could keep going on. I have a lot more lessons than 4 that I've learned over the course of my career, but I'm sure this video is already long enough. So those are just some of the lessons learned in 4 years as a full-time author. I hope you found these helpful and that you will use them in your own authoring journey, and happy writing, friends.